I'm James Draper. I'm the manager of the Manchester Writing School here at Manchester Metropolitan University, and the main role I've got here at the university is looking after our MA Creative Writing programme. So I look after the day-to-day running of the programme. Students that we have here on campus in Manchester, which is about half of our cohort, 100 or so in total, and also our online distance learning students. That's another 100 or so that make up the rest of the group. Why events like this are so important for creative writing students and graduates is that while we do have an element of this on our MA programme, the main focus of what we do there is actually in producing the creative writing. So what we do as the day-to-day business of the course is get our students to read literature and then read it as writers, look at the techniques and styles, and then in the workshops produce their own works in progress aiming towards a full-length book. We do have an element on the course which is having guest speakers from the publishing industry, but nothing which has got the kind of extensive face-to-face industry thing that we're seeing here today, where we're actually asking our students and graduates to pitch their work directly to publishers, agents from the industry, with a view to hopefully making a deal or just getting the experience of going through that process, of having the confidence and the ability to get their work across very succinctly in a timed slot to those industry people. The main reason why it's important to have an event like this in Manchester rather than in London is, as many of the speakers today have mentioned, this kind of thing happens a lot in the country, but it does tend to have a London focus, and we don't really have an awful lot of activities like this on this scale in the north of England and in Manchester. Manchester in particular is a thriving centre of creative arts, lots of literary activities, a huge literature scene, live literature scene. I think a couple of years ago someone did a study and revealed that you could be at a literary event every single night of the week in Manchester. So there's a huge base of activity, a huge base of talent here. We are the biggest postgraduate writing programme in the country, so with just under 250 students overall, there is a huge focus of that talent here. And because the industry does tend to be London focused, I think it's absolutely vital to bring those contacts up here and give our students a chance to meet them on our home turf. I think it's absolutely vital. And it's great as well that we've got members of the public who aren't our students and graduates involved in that as well, because again, it brings them into contact with the writing school and gives them, through us, that opportunity to make those industry links. So I think it's really important that we've done this today.
My name is Daniel Hahn. I'm the chair of the Society of Authors. The Society is the Writers' Union of the UK. It represents about 9,500 writers of all kinds, and it offers advice and support to individual writers and advocacy for the profession as a whole. A lot of people join the Society of Authors for help specifically with their contract. So a lot of it, new writers who maybe have their first contract with an agent or a publisher, and the Society goes through and vets the contracts clause by clause. I think it's very important, especially for people who are starting out in the profession, to be able to think very precisely about the kind of contracts they have, the kind of relationships they're building with their publishers and their agents. I think probably a lot of people come into the profession with not entirely realistic expectations of how it works. I think it's a very slow profession often to get into. It's not difficult to write and even to be published, but it's very difficult to make money in the profession. So I think people need to develop a sort of realistic sense of what they can get out of a writing career. I think people have to get used to the idea that writing, for most people, will only be a part of what they do. Most people don't make a living just from their writing. And to learn how they can be, I suppose, flexible and collaborative, learn to work with editors, learn to work in lots of different ways in order to make we say a writing career. It's slightly misleading to suggest that there is such a thing, but for want of a better phrase, a writing career.
My name is McCauley, and I'm a poetry submissions editor for New Welsh Review, and I'm a poet and I write reviews and essays as well. In the poetry which gets submitted to New Welsh Review, what I'm looking for is something completely unexpected, which breaks every rule that's ever been mentioned in a creative writing class, and which makes me think I didn't think that was possible in poetry. Learn the rules inside out, learn how to write a sonnet, learn how to write a villanelle, master all of the things which you're taught at university, and use that experience in order to innovate and bring out your own voice and your own experimentalism. I think the biggest mistake people make when they want to get published is rushing into it too quickly. A lot of poets I've spoken to mention the fact that they wish their first collection hadn't been published, and if they could, they would erase its presence completely. So I think try not to be impatient, spend the time, put the hours in to your craft, spending time with language. It's ultimately with poetry, it's about you and your relationship with language. You're not going to make any money out of it. It's really got to be something genuine that's coming from you. Reviews are something which is quite controversial, I suppose. In the world of poetry, there are poets like Alice Oswald, for example, and Anne Carson, in fact, as well, who don't read reviews of their work, and they think that viewers are completely superfluous and useless. And then there is also, particularly in the UK, I would say, a very strong reviewing culture where people tend to review one another's books. However, those people are friends. And I think it's bad form to review a friend's book because you're not going to be impartial. So for me, there's a happy medium with reviewing. It should always be impartial, unbiased. You should declare an interest if it's somebody you know. And I think reviews can be a really important part of the critical culture, and I think they were originally, and that's where we get literary criticism from a healthy culture of reviewing, writers writing about other people's work. I think when it's done well, reviewing is really important.
My name is Kerry Plitt, and I'm a literary agent at Conville & Walsh. At Conville & Walsh, I am looking for both fiction and nonfiction. In fiction, I'm looking for literary fiction generally, which is something that is very hard to define, and I'm sure a lot of other agents have said that. Basically, if something grabs me, whether it's the voice, the setting, the writing on the page, then I'll go for it. In terms of nonfiction, it's a little easier to define. I'm looking for pop science, narrative nonfiction, sports, art, bit of feminism, and, well, actually anything that grabs me in that sense as well. One of my bugbears is people waking up at the very beginning of a novel. There are novels that do it well, but if you're a first-time writer, don't have your character waking up at the beginning of the novel. Also, don't describe the sky as gunmetal gray. My advice to graduates who have just graduated is to do your research in terms of agents. The best submissions I get always acknowledge the kind of books that I'm looking for and why they're submitting to me specifically. So think about where your novel would sit on the market, think about what kind of agent would represent it, and then make sure that you find the right agents and submit to them personally.
My name is Charlotte Seymour. I work as an agent at Andrew Nurnberg Associates in London. I'm here to explain to budding authors a little bit more about the role of the agent, why it's so important now to have an agent to guide you through the publishing process, and also to hear what's out there and hopefully hear some really great pitches for new books. I would love to find books that are either in the literary or upmarket commercial genres, and apart from beautiful writing, a really great hook, good characters, so the things I think all agents are looking for, I'd really like to see a twist on a genre. So it might be literary fiction with a speculative twist, literary fiction that has a crime element, all those things. And then I'm also looking for the spectacular narrative non-fiction, such as a memoir. And finally, I love cookbooks. I think what I'm not looking for is more of the same. And so while you always want to identify the market for a book in terms of the readership it will appeal to in comparison to existing authors, what I'd really like to find is something new that crosses boundaries. I would say put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to make use of every connection you've got, and be persistent and be patient, because it can be a really long, frustrating process. The same is true for agents working with writers, trying to find publishers, and you just have to keep going and keep going. And I think if you've got something really good to offer, if you hold out and hang in there, you will succeed.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm an editor at Ebury Publishing, and I work on the fiction list, which includes Ebury Press and Del Rey, which is our science fiction and fantasy imprint. I commission across all commercial genres, but I really like books that have a really good voice and main character that I can really get on board with and relate to. And I'm particularly interested in YA crossover books that have a really good issue-led main character and story. My main tip would be authors and prospective writers is to read as much as you can. Find something that you think encapsulates the kind of book that you want to write, and just kind of, you know, get as much inspiration as you can from other things that are doing well at the moment and books that you really enjoy, and find out what it is about those books that work, essentially.
My name is Johanna Swanson and I work at an agency called Hahn & Swanson. I wouldn't say we specialise in anything in particular. We're open to all kinds of fiction and non-fiction. However, we do have quite a strong women's fiction list. And when people are pitching, I think if they can sum up their book in 2 or 3 sentences, or even just 1 sentence, that shows me that they really know what their story is and they've been able to sum it up. I think if they're able to compare their writing, not necessarily to other authors in the way that my writing is like J.K. Rowling's writing, but my writing would appeal to readers who read J.K. Rowling's writing, that shows some kind of market awareness. But by the way, never use J.K. Rowling as an example. I think it's good to show that you've read in your genre and you can compare yourself to other people in that area. Top tip would be to just read incredibly widely. So read in the genre that you want to write, but also read across the genres. I think if you want to write romance, you can still learn a lot from reading crime and thrillers. I think that's very important.
Hello, my name's Kevin Duffy. I'm the publisher at Blue Moose Books. We're based in Hebden Bridge and we publish literary fiction. What we really look for is great fiction beautifully told, slightly different than the celebrity publishing that you get from the big corporates. Something like Bee Stings by Benjamin Myers, which has been shortlisted for the Portico. So authors send us lots of work. We don't publish poetry and we don't publish children's books or YA, mostly literary fiction, but great stories beautifully told. One of the things we always tell, we do get sent a lot of work and the author hasn't finished writing the novel. We always tell people you've got to finish the novel before you send it off. 5th or 6th draft, you need to write the first draft and then rewrite. And even when you think after 5 or 6 drafts you think it's completed, we will work with you for 18 months with an editorial team to fine-tune and make it the best book it can possibly be.
Hello, my name is Manga Bhima and I'm an assistant editor at Penguin Random House Children's UK. I'm here today at the Creative Writing Graduate Fair to hear pitches from authors who are looking to have their work published. Some of the questions that I've received today are about what publishers are looking for in terms of submissions, what specifically are the trends in YA and how important are they to publishers, and also how to get noticed in a world that's full of content. I think today's world where we're surrounded by social media, the way for an author to get noticed is to build their profile as much as they can on the platforms where they know readers are already looking to speak to and connect with authors. There's a huge community working in children's publishing. There's a particularly huge community in YA at the moment, but also middle grade authors and agents looking for submissions from YA and middle grade authors are looking to social media to find new voices. So most of the pitches that we receive from agents come to us via email, and we receive lots of emails every day, as you can imagine. So basically hearing an agent's passion for a particular author and their story, that really comes across, and when it does, that's really exciting for us as publishers. We can feel the excitement and get on board with that from the beginning. My top tip, I guess, for a creative writing graduate looking to get published would be to really hone their first draft as much as they absolutely can, get as many people to read it as possible, and just do the simple things like, spell check everything, make sure you've read it again before you're submitting to agents, because primarily publishers will receive submissions from agents, not things direct from the author themselves. So the agent will probably be looking for the same things that we are, somebody who's got a good grasp of the English language and can write confidently. And of course, when a submission is submitted to us, and when we accept it and when we publish it, it goes through lots of checking. So, if you're not 100% au fait with the semicolon, we can probably sort that out, copy editing. But we're all looking for fantastic writing. So primarily just kind of reading and getting as much feedback as possible before you submit it is probably the way to go.
Hi, I'm Mark Kessler. I work at Susanna Lee Associates. We're a literary agency with offices in London, Paris and New York. In a pitch, I look for clarity, just to know exactly what kind of book it is, to know if it's for us or not, to get all that out of the way. And then an idea of the setting, and then just nothing too fancy really, just the plot in a few words. I think often people err by trying to make it too elaborate. Well, if you just have an interesting story and you can present that, that's really enough.
My name is Michael Rowley. I'm the editorial director of Del Rey, which is the dedicated science fiction, fantasy and horror imprint of Ebury Publishing at Penguin Random House UK. So my background is, well, it's kind of interesting actually, hopefully. I did 15 years at Waterstones, half of that on the shop floor at the Manchester Deansgate branch of Waterstones, and the other half I worked as a fiction buyer at head office, where I did various roles, from the fiction buying core range coordinator, which is basically looking after the backlist range of fiction, biography and travel writing actually at one point for the company. And then I moved on to doing category buying for all of genre fiction, specialising in science fiction, fantasy, graphic novels, manga, romance fiction, erotic fiction, all those kind of things. Then I moved into campaign buying, which is the kind of like 3 for £2 off kind of offers, and then back to range. And then in 2011 I moved into publishing. What you're looking for in a new writer's work: high concept and good writing. I mean, quality is all the nuts and bolts of it. You know, quality of writing, concept has to be really, really good, and it's got to be you know, interesting, exciting, and have passion. I think, you know, and get that passion across to you when you're reading it. Well, I think it's a very exciting time, I think, to be in genre fiction at the moment. In particular, you know, cross-genre, again, high-concept genre fiction is the thing that we're seeing doing very, very well. We published The Martian by Andy Weir, which of course has had a very broad and wide appeal across readership, from core genre fans to mainstream fiction fans to people who just don't even think of it as science fiction at all. I think you've got other interesting books out there like Station 11, which are doing similar things. So I think that's a really good place to start for genre fiction writers. Find something that's high concept, cross-genre, and, you know, good quality writing. Pitfalls for new writers wanting to be published. In a way, it's almost, I suppose, the opposite to the previous question. I think pitfalls would be writing something that's perhaps too cliched or too overworked in the genre. I think being aware of the market and what's popular is always a good thing for new writers. But I think ultimately, you know, they have to be passionate about their project, and that has to show through in their work. So I would never say don't write a particular genre or subgenre of something just because of other reasons. But I think, you know, if you're looking at things that are tough commercially, then that is, on a very practical level, that could be problematic for you. And I think hopefully, though, you know, if you can make those, you know, unique points in your book and have those interesting, exciting characters that people can fall in love with, and stories that will engage, then I think that will help. But I think, you know, be aware of the market is one of the pitfalls that I think authors don't always go for. And when you get to the point of pitching your stuff to agents and to publishers, make sure you're going to the right people for it, I think. Top tip for a new creative writing graduate? Well, I think obviously they've been working for a year on their project, presumably in some form or another, and they're going to have their dissertation and either a partial or a full manuscript. I think, you know, if they've been spending a lot of energy on that, they then should then spend the same kind of energy in the practical side of getting it published, which means doing their background research and their work and making sure their pitch is right, and their synopsis and their covering letter and their opening samples that they send out to agents and publishers are both as good as they can possibly be, and also aimed at the right agents and the right publishers. Because obviously, you know, you can go through the Writer's Narcissist Yearbook and you can just send it to everybody, but that's not necessarily going to be the best thing or the most productive thing for you to do. I mean, I think you have to take that side of the creative process as seriously as the writing in many ways, especially in a competitive market. I think increasingly with social media, yeah, I mean, there's a strong element of self-promotion. I mean, people are looking to Twitter these days. They're looking to YouTube in particular, which is, you know, a big thing now. It's apparently the number 2 search engine that everybody uses after Google is YouTube, which is really fascinating. So I think to engage with people and have the opportunity to connect with people online is actually really, really great. And let's face it, it's only been really going on in the sort of Twitterverse for 10 years max, and in any meaningful way. So I think the opportunity to be able to engage directly with readers is very, very important for writers now, and to be able to build those conversations, and not necessarily to be using it purely as a marketing tool, but really to have those points of contact and those human discussions with people. I think that's invaluable. It's a great resource for people, and Facebook and all the rest of those social media channels, yeah, I'd say a very important part of succeeding these days. Well, for me, as a genre fiction publisher, I think this idea of breaking down boundaries of what people want to read, I mean, for a long time, you know, science fiction, fantasy, for instance, or horror, have been very sort of like boxed in and very much considered to be, you know, things that not only a few people read. And I think we now have a lot of readers coming up who've had a completely different reading experience in their youth than I had, in that there's so much YA and teen fiction now available, which just wasn't there when I was growing up. So people are now, I think, they're going into their adult reading life with the opportunities or the benefits of not having these barriers, these genre barriers that perhaps, you know, some people have still. And so they're more open to reading books across a wide variety of genres. And I think that's a fantastically exciting thing in the publishing industry at the moment, the ability to publish into a wider market.
I'm Nathan Connolly. I'm the Publishing Director of Dead Ink Books. We're a publisher of literary fiction from new and emerging authors. When looking at submissions, what we're looking to publish is broadly literary fiction, but more specifically we're looking at work which approaches fiction in a slightly different way, is original, and tries to be exciting. Particularly we're interested in debut authors and publishing their work for the first time and developing their careers as they go forward. At Dead Ink we're not looking for work which relies too squarely on genre, and work in which the author doesn't have a definite and confident voice. We're very much looking for work which is original and says something about who wrote it. A book which I really wish we'd been able to publish, even though it wasn't from a debut author, was Don DeLilio's Point Omega. I think it was a work that was short, exciting, it contained a wholeness of voice and structure and said something about the contemporary world in which it was set. And that, for me, is exactly what a book, or at least literary fiction, should do. Do I believe there is a gap in the market? I don't think there is a whole area which isn't covered, but I do think there are lots of small gaps which make it increasingly difficult for literary fiction to be published, particularly if it's from new authors. And I do think there needs to be a more sustainable route for authors to develop their career as they progress from first novel onwards, and I hope that Dead Ink takes up that position.
I'm Richard T Kelley. I'm an editor at the Hutchinson imprint of Penguin Random House. When I get a proposal from an agent, I'm looking for a story and a voice and a clear sense that somebody has got an acute perception of the world and the means of conveying it in prose. What I don't like to see in a proposal is bad spelling and syntax, or just as badly, the sloppiness of thought and conception that sometimes accompanies it. What excites me most about non-fiction right now is the changing times for human beings, the way we live today and what it means to be human, that tumultuous change. There's a lot there for writers to respond to and to break new ground. I'm very proud to be overseeing a wonderful book by Rob Cowan called Common Ground, which is a wonderful hybrid of nature writing and personal writing, and a look at the north of England. It's also a look at how we're living, the length of this country. The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan's a pretty good book at the moment. Anybody who aspires to write a history of the world, I think, deserves every credit.
Hi, my name is Jasmine, and my debut novel, The Summer of Secrets, was published in August this year with Transworld. My process to publishing came about as a combination of good luck and good timing and having a novel finished. So the novel was my MA portfolio, so that was what was great about being on an MA with a whole novel as the end product. I was at an awards ceremony in London for the Terry Pratchett Award, not for me, for someone else, and the room was full of publishing professionals. So I talked to a lot of them. We had some good conversations, and I asked if I could practice my pitch on them because I wasn't sure what was working and what wasn't working, and it seemed like a really good opportunity to get a professional judgment on that. That went quite well. One of the people I met was Jo Unwin, who is an agent who at the time was working as an editor for Bloomsbury or Doubleday, and she gave me some good feedback, very kindly read my novel and asked if I'd like an introduction to an agent, which of course I snapped at. That's now my agent, Kerry from Conville and Walsh. On the same evening at the awards ceremony, I met another editor called Katie Loftus, who works for Transworld, who ended up commissioning my novel and working with me on the first stage of edits. Then she left for HarperCollins, had another editor who took me through to the end of the process. A piece of advice I'd give to someone who is at the point of finishing their MA and they have a manuscript that's finished is to keep going. It's a really dispiriting process at times. Up until the point where I had that amazing evening and met everybody, it really didn't look as if anything was happening. I hadn't submitted to a lot of places, I had loads and loads of things left to do, but you can't help but feel dispirited sometimes that nobody is recognising what you're doing, you're just not getting the opportunities. You have to go out and keep trying to find the opportunities. You have to make the most of the opportunities you have, and you have to keep going. Most people aren't published because they stop trying to do it, and if you're passionate about it, you will keep going. And so that's it, just keep hoping, because you never know when it's going to happen. You only know it's happened after that. So it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. And so it's just keep on trying.